The desert air shimmered like broken glass as Captain Vera Ghost Kowalski adjusted the scope on her M110 sniper rifle for the third time in 10 minutes. The weapon had been acting up since the sandstorm 2 days prior. The elevation knob stuck, the windage drifting left with every shot. Around her, the other members of Task Force Reaper lounged in whatever shade they could find, their confidence radiating through the scorching Nevada heat like mirages. "You sure about that busted rifle, Ghost?" Staff Sergeant Martinez called out, his voice carrying the kind of casual mockery that military units thrived on. "Maybe we should get you a slingshot instead." The laughter that followed was good-natured but pointed. They'd all seen her struggle at the range yesterday, missing targets that should have been routine. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison emerged from the command tent, squinting against the sun. "All right, people, we've got movement on the perimeter. Drone activity, high altitude, moving fast. Intel suggests it's one of those new prototype units, adaptive flight patterns, counter-surveillance tech. The kind that's been ghosting our best pilots for months." Ghost felt her pulse quicken. This wasn't just another training exercise. The drone they were hunting had embarrassed 3 different special operations units, evading capture with an almost supernatural ability to predict human behavior. It moved like it was reading minds, anticipating every tactical decision before teams could execute them. "Ghost, you're our long-range eyes," Harrison continued, his tone neutral but weighted with expectation. "If this thing shows itself, we need that rifle singing." She nodded, checking her equipment one final time. The rifle felt foreign in her hands, not the reliable partner she'd carried through 2 tours in Afghanistan, but something treacherous, unpredictable. Around her, she could sense the team's skepticism. They'd seen her service record, knew about her confirmed kills, her decorations, but yesterday's performance had planted seeds of doubt. The radio crackled to life. "Reaper 6, this is Overwatch. Target acquired, bearing 270, altitude approximately 8,000 feet. Target is... Jesus, it's moving like nothing I've ever seen." Ghost raised her binoculars, scanning the empty sky. For a moment there was nothing, just the vast blue canvas of desert atmosphere. Then, barely visible against the sun's glare, she caught it. A dark speck dancing through the air with impossible grace, defying every principle of aerodynamics she'd learned in her 15 years of military service. The drone moved like liquid mercury, flowing through space rather than flying through it. Her teammates scrambled to their positions, but Ghost remained still, watching. There was something about the way it moved, not random, but following a pattern only she could sense. The morning sun climbed higher as Task Force Reaper spread across the desert floor like pieces on a chess board. Ghost positioned herself on a rocky outcropping, her damaged rifle resting against a weathered boulder. Through her scope, she tracked the drone's erratic flight pattern, noting how it seemed to anticipate their movements with uncanny precision. "Reaper 2, moving to intercept," radioed Sergeant Kim, the team's designated marksman. His voice carried the confidence of someone who'd never missed a shot that mattered. Ghost watched through her binoculars as he settled into a textbook shooting position, his rifle pristine, calibrated, reliable, trained on the dancing target above. The drone dropped suddenly, a vertical dive that defied physics. Kim adjusted, leading the target expertly. His shot cracked across the desert, the sound echoing off distant mesas. The bullet passed harmlessly through empty air as the drone twisted away at the last possible second, its movement so fluid it seemed choreographed. "Negative hit," Kim reported, frustration creeping into his professional tone. "Target's movement is unpredictable, doesn't cover it, sir." Ghost continued her observation, her damaged scope wavering slightly with each micro-adjustment. The drone's pattern wasn't random, it was adaptive, learning from each engagement. She'd seen similar behavior in Afghanistan, but never from a machine. This was different, revolutionary. "Reaper 3 taking the shot," came Martinez's voice. He was their heavy weapons specialist, but also an accomplished marksman. His rifle barked twice in rapid succession, both rounds calculated to intersect the drone's projected path. The target seemed to sense the incoming projectiles, banking sharply left then right, the bullets missing by mere inches. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison's voice cut through the radio chatter. All units, maintain position. This thing's reading our tactics in real time. We need a different approach. Ghost studied the drone through her scope, noting how it paused between evasive maneuvers, almost as if it was analyzing their responses. The machine wasn't just fast, it was intelligent, processing their behavioral patterns and adapting accordingly. Every shot they fired gave it more data to work with. "Permission to engage, sir," she requested, her voice steady despite the rifle's instability. A pause. She could almost hear the doubt in Harrison's silence. Yesterday's performance had clearly left an impression. "Negative, Ghost. Let Kim and Martinez work the problem. You provide overwatch and intelligence." She bit back her response, understanding the tactical logic even as it stung. Why risk the shot when better equipment was available? But as she watched the drone continue its impossible dance through the desert sky, Ghost felt something her teammates couldn't, a connection, an understanding of the machine's rhythm that transcended mere observation. The sun climbed higher, and with each passing minute the drone grew bolder. The drone's confidence was becoming its signature. After evading 6 more shots from the team's best marksmen, it began performing what could only be described as aerial taunts, loops, rolls, and impossible directional changes that seemed designed more for show than evasion. The machine had learned their capabilities and found them wanting. "This is getting embarrassing," Martinez muttered over the comm, sweat beading on his forehead despite the morning chill. "It's like the thing's playing with us." Ghost continued her patient observation, tracking the drone's movements through her unreliable scope. Each time the crosshairs drifted left, she compensated mentally, building a map of her rifle's inconsistencies. The weapon that had betrayed her yesterday was teaching her its new language, and she was beginning to understand its broken poetry. "Reaper 6, this is command," Harrison's radio crackled. "Time constraint update. We have a narrow window before this exercise concludes. If we can't demonstrate capability against this target, the contract goes to another unit." The implications hung heavy in the desert air. Task Force Reaper had built their reputation on impossible shots and successful missions. One failure could unravel years of credibility. Ghost felt the weight of that pressure, but also something else, opportunity. She watched as the drone settled into a hover pattern roughly 1,200 meters out, its sensors apparently focused on Kim's position. The machine had identified him as the primary threat based on his earlier accuracy. It was a tactical assessment that revealed the drone's sophistication, but also its limitation. It was still thinking in conventional terms. "Sir," Ghost's voice cut through the radio chatter, requesting permission to attempt an unconventional approach. "Negative, Ghost. Your rifle's compromised. We can't risk." "Sir, with respect, the drone's behavioral pattern suggests it's analyzing threats based on previous engagement parameters. It's not accounting for equipment variables." Harrison's pause stretched longer this time. Through her scope, Ghost could see him in the distance, weighing options with the methodical precision that had made him a respected field commander. The drone continued its hover, almost mockingly stable now that it had assessed and cataloged their capabilities. "Explain your thinking, Captain." Ghost adjusted her position slightly, feeling the broken rifle settle into an uncomfortable but workable configuration. "The target's evasion algorithm is based on predicted ballistic performance from standard military equipment. My rifle's malfunction creates variables the system hasn't encountered: irregular trajectory, unexpected timing, compromised accuracy that might paradoxically become an advantage." Silence filled the radio frequency. Around her, she could sense the team's skepticism crystallizing into something harder. They'd seen her miss easy shots. Now she was proposing that her broken equipment might succeed where their precision had failed. The drone began moving again, a lazy figure-eight pattern that seemed almost contemptuous. The desert heat was building, creating thermal layers that would complicate any long-distance shot. Ghost watched the drone through her scope, noting how it moved with the confidence of something untouchable. In its aerial patterns, she recognized a kind of mechanical arrogance, the assumption that human capability had been fully measured and found predictable. "Ghost, you have one shot," Harrison's voice finally crackled through the radio. "Make it count." The rest of the team went silent. Even their breathing seemed muted as Ghost settled into her firing position, her damaged rifle feeling both foreign and familiar in her hands. Through the scope, the drone appeared to sense the shift in tactical focus, its movements becoming slightly more erratic as its sensors identified her as a new active threat. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the wind patterns, the rifle's weight distribution, the way the broken elevation knob wanted to drift. In Afghanistan, she'd learned to shoot with damaged equipment, to make precision shots when precision itself was compromised. The skill wasn't about perfection, it was about adaptation, about finding accuracy in the spaces between failure. Opening her eyes, she tracked the drone through her scope. It was moving faster now, clearly aware that it was being targeted. But its evasion pattern remained algorithmic, based on data from previous engagements. It expected her to fire when the target was centered, when the conditions were optimal, when everything aligned according to military doctrine. Instead, Ghost waited. She watched as the drone completed another loop, noting the slight hesitation at the apex of its turn. The machine was sophisticated, but it was still following programmed responses to stimulus, and every program had exploitable patterns. The crosshairs drifted left as her rifle's scope defect manifested again. She didn't adjust. Instead, she waited for the moment when the drone would be precisely where the broken scope wanted to point, when its mechanical logic would intersect with her rifle's unpredictable characteristics. Through the radio, she could hear her teammates' tense breathing. Martinez whispered a prayer in Spanish. Kim was muttering calculations under his breath. Harrison remained silent, trusting her judgment despite yesterday's failures. The drone banked left, beginning another of its contemptuous loops. Ghost felt her heartbeat slow, her breathing deepen. This wasn't about vindication or proving doubters wrong. This was about understanding, recognizing that sometimes broken things could accomplish what perfect things could not. Her rifle might be damaged, but it was damaged in a way that created unique capabilities. She began to apply pressure to the trigger, feeling the familiar resistance that preceded every shot that mattered. Time compressed into a single moment of crystalline clarity. Ghost felt the trigger break cleanly despite her rifle's other defects, the familiar recoil pushing against her shoulder as the bullet began its journey across 1,200 meters of desert air. The shot felt different from yesterday's failures, not because the rifle had somehow healed itself, but because she had finally learned to speak its broken language fluently. Through her scope, she watched the bullet's trajectory intersect with the drone's flight path at the precise instant, when the machine committed to an evasive maneuver that its programming deemed optimal. The drone's sophisticated sensors had calculated the threat vector based on where her rifle appeared to be aiming, not accounting for the scope's leftward drift that Ghost had stopped compensating for. The impact was devastating. The drone's composite frame crumpled as the .308 round tore through its central processing unit, sending the machine tumbling toward the desert floor in a shower of sparks and debris. Its impossible grace transformed instantly into the awkward physics of falling metal, the algorithmic perfection replaced by the honest simplicity of gravity. For a moment the radio remained silent. Then Martinez's voice erupted across the frequency. "Holy shit, Ghost, you actually—" "Confirm target down," Harrison interrupted, his professional composure intact but tinged with something approaching awe. "Outstanding shooting, Captain. Textbook unconventional warfare. Ghost lowered her rifle, feeling the desert heat finally penetrate her concentration. Around her, the team was erupting in celebration, their earlier skepticism transforming into the kind of respect that could only be earned under fire. But she felt something different, not vindication, but confirmation of something she'd always suspected about the relationship between perfection and effectiveness. "How the hell did you know that would work?" Kim's voice carried genuine curiosity rather than challenge. Ghost checked her rifle's safety, her movements deliberate and practiced. Sometimes broken things see patterns that perfect things miss. The drone was learning our capabilities, but it was learning them based on expected performance parameters. My rifle's malfunction created variables outside its programming. She paused, looking up at the empty sky where moments before an untouchable target had danced with mechanical arrogance. It wasn't expecting something that worked differently than it was supposed to. Harrison approached her position, his expression thoughtful. "Captain, I think we need to discuss revising our equipment standards, and your call sign might need some updating too." Ghost smiled, slinging her damaged rifle across her shoulder. The weapon still had a stuck elevation knob and drifting windage. It was still unreliable, unpredictable, and technically defective. But it was also uniquely capable in ways that perfect equipment could never be. The mission debrief took place in the air-conditioned comfort of the command trailer, but Ghost's mind remained focused on the moment of impact, analyzing what had happened and why. Around the table sat Task Force Reaper's senior members. Their attitudes toward her shifted subtly but permanently. Yesterday she had been the weak link. Today she was something else entirely. "The drone's behavioral analysis was impressive," Lieutenant Colonel Harrison began, scrolling through data on his tablet. "Our intelligence division has been tracking this particular unit for 3 months. It had successfully evaded capture attempts by Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, and Marine Force Recon. Each engagement taught it more about conventional military tactics." He looked up at Ghost, his expression carrying new respect. Until today, no one had considered that unconventional equipment might produce unconventional results. The target's evasion algorithms were sophisticated enough to predict standard ballistic performance, but couldn't account for equipment malfunction variables. Sergeant Martinez leaned forward, his earlier mockery replaced by professional interest. So Ghost's broken rifle was actually an advantage. "More than that," Ghost replied, her voice steady. "The rifle forced me to think differently about the entire engagement. Instead of trying to overcome its limitations, I had to work within them. The drone was expecting perfect shots from perfect equipment. It wasn't programmed to handle imperfect shots that were perfectly placed." Kim nodded slowly, like fighting a chess grandmaster with checkers pieces. "Exactly. The machine's intelligence was its vulnerability. It was too sophisticated to account for simple, broken solutions." Harrison stood, moving to the trailer's small window that overlooked the crash site where recovery teams were collecting drone debris. "Captain Kowalski, I'm recommending you for the Medal of Merit for innovative tactical thinking. But more importantly, I want to discuss a new assignment." Ghost felt her pulse quicken. New assignments in their unit usually meant increased responsibility, more challenging targets, operations that pushed the boundaries of what special forces could accomplish. "There's a program developing at Fort Bragg," Harrison continued. "Asymmetric warfare applications. They're looking for operators who can think beyond conventional parameters, who can find success in situations where standard approaches fail. Your performance today suggests you might be exactly what they're looking for." The offer hung in the air like desert heat shimmer. Fort Bragg meant career advancement, recognition, the opportunity to help develop new tactical doctrines. It also meant leaving Task Force Reaper, the unit that had become her military family despite their occasional doubts about her capabilities. "What about the team, sir?" she asked. "The team will be fine. But more importantly, what you accomplished today needs to be studied, refined, taught. Other units are facing similar challenges with advanced enemy technology. Your approach could change how we engage next-generation threats. Ghost looked around the table at her teammates' faces. The decision wasn't immediate, but it was inevitable. 3 weeks later, Ghost found herself at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where the humidity felt like a physical presence after months in the Nevada desert. The asymmetric warfare applications program operated from a cluster of unremarkable buildings that could have housed any administrative function, their anonymity carefully cultivated. Her new commanding officer, Colonel Rebecca Thorne, was a compact woman with intelligent eyes and the kind of stillness that suggested coiled energy. During their first meeting, she got straight to the point. "Captain, what you accomplished in Nevada was remarkable not because of the shot itself, but because of the thinking behind it. Most operators try to overcome equipment limitations. You found a way to weaponize yours." The program's mission became clear over the following days. They were developing tactics for engaging enemies who possessed technological advantages, drones, AI-assisted targeting systems, predictive defense networks. Traditional military approaches often failed because they relied on superiority in equipment and training. But increasingly, American forces were encountering adversaries whose technology matched or exceeded their own. "The future battlefield won't be won by who has the best equipment," Colonel Thorne explained during a briefing. "It'll be won by who can think most creatively about how to use whatever equipment they have." Ghost's first assignment involved working with a team of engineers and cognitive scientists to analyze her successful engagement with the drone. They wanted to understand not just what she had done, but how she had thought about the problem. Frame-by-frame analysis of her shots, psychological profiling of her decision-making process, even biomechanical studies of how she adapted her shooting technique to accommodate her rifle's defects. "Most interesting thing," Dr. Sarah Chen, the program's lead researcher, told her after reviewing weeks of data, "is that you didn't just adapt to your equipment's limitations. You developed a completely different relationship with uncertainty. Where most marksmen see equipment failure as something to overcome, you saw it as a tactical asset." The insight felt both validating and slightly uncomfortable. Ghost had always known she thought about problems differently than her peers, but having that difference analyzed and quantified made it feel less instinctive and more clinical. "The question," Dr. Chen continued, "is whether this kind of thinking can be taught, or if it's something that emerges from specific personality traits and experiences." That question would drive the next phase of Ghost's military career, as she transitioned from operator to instructor, learning to articulate intuitive processes that had previously been beyond words. The training facility at Fort Bragg looked like any other military installation from the outside, but inside it buzzed with the kind of creative tension that emerged when unconventional minds were given license to experiment. Ghost found herself working with operators from every branch of service, each selected for their ability to succeed in situations where standard approaches had failed. "Today we're going to talk about equipment relationships," she told a group of 12 special operations veterans during her first formal instruction session. "Not equipment mastery, relationship. The difference between trying to impose your will on your tools versus learning to dance with their capabilities and limitations." The concept was foreign to most of them. Military training emphasized equipment proficiency, maintenance standards, and performance optimization. The idea that deliberately accepting equipment flaws could create tactical advantages challenged everything they'd been taught. "Ma'am," questioned Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, a Marine sniper with an impressive service record, "are you suggesting we should intentionally use defective equipment?" "I'm suggesting that perfect equipment isn't always the best tool for the job. Sometimes the enemy's countermeasures are designed specifically to defeat perfect performance. When that happens, imperfection becomes a form of camouflage. She demonstrated with her Nevada rifle, which had been carefully preserved in its broken state. On the range, she showed them how the scope's drift created unpredictable but consistent patterns, how the stuck elevation knob forced her to think about vertical trajectory in new ways. The key, she explained, isn't the malfunction itself. It's developing the mental flexibility to find advantages in disadvantages, to see tactical opportunities in situations that initially appear to be problems. The students watched with fascination and skepticism as she consistently hit targets using techniques that violated every principle of marksmanship they'd been taught. More importantly, they began to understand that the rifle was just a metaphor for a larger philosophical approach to warfare. This isn't about broken equipment, realized Captain Williams, an Army Ranger with 3 combat tours. This is about broken thinking, about accepting that sometimes the best solution doesn't look like what we expect the best solution to look like. Ghost nodded. Exactly. Our enemies are studying our tactics, our equipment, our decision-making patterns. They're developing countermeasures based on how they expect us to behave. If we behave differently, if we embrace uncertainty instead of trying to eliminate it, we become unpredictable. The breakthrough came during the 4th week of training, when the class engaged targets using a variety of intentionally compromised equipment. The evolution of Ghost's teaching methods reflected her growing understanding of how conventional military thinking created its own vulnerabilities. During her 6th month at Fort Bragg, she developed what became known as the Kowalski Protocol, a systematic approach to identifying and exploiting the gaps between enemy expectations and operational reality. Every enemy system is designed to counter specific threats, she explained to a visiting group of Pentagon officials. Advanced AI-driven defenses, adaptive camouflage, predictive targeting, they're all based on analyzing historical data about how American forces operate. They expect us to be precise, methodical, and technologically superior. The demonstration that followed became legendary within special operations circles. Ghost and her students engaged a series of targets using equipment that ranged from slightly impaired to nearly dysfunctional, achieving success rates that exceeded those of units using state-of-the-art gear. The officials watched in fascination as Sergeant Martinez, the same Martinez who had mocked her broken rifle in Nevada, successfully engaged multiple targets using a rifle with a cracked scope and loose mounting hardware. His technique was unorthodox, almost improvised, but devastatingly effective. "How is this possible?" asked General Patterson, the Pentagon's Director of Special Operations. "Because the targets were designed to defeat perfect performance," Ghost replied. "They had countermeasures for every standard approach we might use, but they had no response protocols for equipment that behaved unpredictably." The implications were staggering. For decades, American military doctrine had emphasized technological superiority as the path to battlefield dominance. Ghost's research suggested that, in some circumstances, technological imperfection might provide tactical advantages that superiority could not. "Captain," General Patterson said after the demonstration, "I want you to brief the Joint Chiefs next month. This could fundamentally change how we think about force structure and equipment procurement." But Ghost was already thinking beyond demonstrations and briefings. The principles she discovered weren't just about shooting. They applied to communication, navigation, timing, every aspect of military operations. What if entire missions could be designed around controlled unpredictability? What if uncertainty itself could become a weapon? Her notebook filled with ideas that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. Mission planning that deliberately incorporated equipment failures. Communication protocols that used technical glitches as forms of encryption. Navigation systems that exploited GPS errors to create untraceable movement patterns. "You're not just thinking outside the box," Colonel Thorne observed during one of their regular meetings. "You're questioning whether the box needs to exist at all." The assessment was accurate. Ghost had moved beyond adapting to limitations toward actively seeking them out. The briefing room in the Pentagon felt different from any space Ghost had previously occupied in her military career. The weight of institutional authority pressed against her consciousness as she faced the Joint Chiefs of Staff, men and women whose decisions shaped global military policy. Her broken rifle sat on the table before her, a symbol of everything her research represented. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment, "what I'm about to demonstrate challenges fundamental assumptions about military effectiveness. For the past year, I've been developing tactical approaches that deliberately embrace equipment limitations, operational uncertainty, and systematic imperfection." General Morrison, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, leaned forward with skeptical interest. "Captain, the American military's competitive advantage has always been technological superiority. Are you suggesting we abandon that advantage?" "No, sir. I'm suggesting we expand our definition of what constitutes an advantage. Our enemies have studied our capabilities for decades. They've developed countermeasures specifically designed to defeat American technological superiority. When we meet their expectations, we're fighting on their terms." She lifted the Nevada rifle, its scope still drifting left, elevation knob still stuck. "This weapon is technically defective. By every military standard, it should be replaced, but because it behaves unpredictably, it can accomplish missions that perfect weapons cannot." The demonstration that followed was carefully choreographed, but no less impressive. Using live video feeds from Fort Bragg, Ghost students engaged a series of adaptive targets using compromised equipment, achieving success rates that surpassed their performance with standard gear. "The targets you're seeing," Ghost explained, "represent current-generation enemy defense systems. They analyze incoming threats, predict performance parameters, and deploy countermeasures accordingly. They expect precision. They expect consistency. They expect us to behave like the military force they've studied for years." On screen, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez engaged multiple targets using a rifle with a bent barrel and loose stock. His shots followed impossible trajectories that confused the defensive system's tracking algorithms, allowing him to achieve hits that should have been technically impossible. "This isn't about accepting inferior equipment," Ghost continued. "It's about recognizing that in some operational environments, unpredictability becomes more valuable than precision. Our enemies can counter what they understand. They cannot counter what defies their analytical models." Admiral Chen, the Navy's representative, asked the question Ghost had been expecting. "What are the broader implications? Are you suggesting we restructure our entire approach to military technology?" "I'm suggesting we develop parallel capabilities. We maintain our technological edge for situations where superiority provides clear advantages. But we also develop our capacity to operate effectively when that superiority is compromised or when tactical unpredictability offers greater benefits." The room fell silent as the implications settled over the assembled leadership. The months following the Pentagon briefing transformed Ghost from an instructor into something unprecedented in military history, a strategic philosopher whose ideas about uncertainty and imperfection began reshaping American military doctrine. The Kowalski Protocols were classified at the highest levels, but their influence spread through special operations communities like whispered legends. At Fort Bragg, her program expanded from a single research initiative to a full-scale training center. Operators from allied nations arrived for instruction in what official documents carefully termed adaptive tactical methodologies. The broken rifle that had started everything was preserved in a climate-controlled case, its scope still drifting left, its elevation knob still stuck, a monument to the idea that perfection wasn't always the goal. You know what's interesting? Colonel Thorne mentioned during one of their final meetings before Ghost's promotion to Major. Your approach isn't actually revolutionary. It's ancient. Every guerrilla movement in history has succeeded by using limitations as advantages. You just figured out how to apply that thinking to modern technological warfare. The observation was profound. Ghost realized that her insights weren't about inventing new tactics, but about rediscovering principles that conventional military thinking had forgotten. Asymmetric warfare had always been about finding strength in apparent weakness, about turning disadvantages into tactical opportunities. Her new assignment came with a promotion to lieutenant colonel and a transfer to a facility that didn't appear on any official maps. The Strategic Uncertainty Division was tasked with developing operational capabilities that enemy intelligence services couldn't predict, analyze, or counter. Ghost found herself leading teams that included not just military operators, but philosophers, artists, chaos mathematicians, and cognitive scientists. Our mission, she told her new team during their first gathering, is to weaponize unpredictability, to develop approaches that work specifically because they don't make sense to conventional analysis. The projects that emerged from this collaboration pushed far beyond anything she had imagined in Nevada. Communication systems that used equipment failures as encryption methods, navigation protocols that deliberately incorporated GPS errors to create untraceable movement patterns, even psychological operations that exploited the human tendency to dismiss seemingly incompetent actions as non-threatening. We're not just thinking outside the box, her deputy, Major Harrison, the same Harrison who had commanded Task Force Reaper, observed. We're convincing our enemies that there is no box. But perhaps the most significant development wasn't tactical or technological. It was cultural. The military personnel who trained under Ghost protocols began thinking differently about failure, limitation, and uncertainty. They developed what researchers called adaptive resilience, the ability to find operational advantages in any circumstance, regardless of how disadvantageous those circumstances initially appeared. The transformation wasn't limited to special operations. The War College lecture hall fell silent as Ghost concluded her presentation on tactical epistemology, how we know what we think we know about warfare. The audience of senior military officers, defense contractors, and strategic analysts sat with the stillness of people processing fundamentally challenging ideas. "Questions?" she asked, her colonel's eagles catching the light from the overhead projectors. General Morrison, the same officer who had questioned her at the Pentagon 2 years earlier, raised his hand. "Colonel Kowalski, your research suggests that our pursuit of military perfection might actually create vulnerabilities. How do we reconcile that with our responsibility to provide our service members with the best possible equipment and training?" "Sir, I'm not suggesting we abandon excellence. I'm suggesting we expand our definition of what excellence looks like. A perfect rifle is excellent for most missions, but for some missions, a rifle that behaves unpredictably might be more excellent than a perfect one." She clicked to her next slide, which showed mission success rates across different operational scenarios. "We've found that units trained in adaptive uncertainty protocols show significantly higher success rates when facing technologically sophisticated adversaries. They're not better soldiers because they use worse equipment. They're better soldiers because they can find tactical advantages in any equipment." The implications had already begun transforming American military culture. Equipment procurement officers were being trained to evaluate not just performance specifications, but adaptability characteristics. Military engineers were designing systems that could degrade gracefully, maintaining operational effectiveness even when functioning suboptimally. "The most important change," Ghost continued, "isn't technological, it's psychological. We're training military personnel to see uncertainty as an opportunity rather than a problem. When equipment fails, when plans go wrong, when situations become unpredictable, our people are learning to ask, what can this enable? Instead of how do we fix this? After the lecture, she walked across the campus where she had first learned military tactics as a young cadet 20 years earlier. The institution remained dedicated to excellence, precision, and technological superiority. But now it also embraced something her younger self could never have imagined, the strategic value of systematic imperfection. Her phone buzzed with a message from Major Rodriguez, now commanding his own adaptive tactical unit in Southeast Asia. Ghost engaged multiple targets today using your broken rifle protocols. Enemy jamming systems couldn't adapt to our compromised communication frequencies. Mission successful. Equipment failures saved lives. Thank you. She smiled, remembering the laughter that had followed her missed shots in the Nevada desert. The same officers who had mocked her broken rifle were now requesting assignment to her programs. The transformation wasn't just professional, it was personal, as each operator learned to find strength in situations where they had previously seen only weakness. 5 years after the drone engagement that changed everything, Ghost stood before her final class at Fort Bragg. Tomorrow, she would assume command of the Strategic Uncertainty Division's expanded operations, overseeing programs that spanned multiple continents and incorporated principles that had fundamentally altered American military doctrine. Today's lesson, she told the assembled operators, is about legacy. Not just what you accomplish, but what your accomplishments enable others to accomplish. Every limitation you overcome, every disadvantage you transform into an advantage, every impossible mission you complete, these create possibilities for the people who come after you. She lifted the Nevada rifle one final time, its scope still drifting left, elevation knob still stuck. The weapon had become more than a tool or symbol. It was a testament to the idea that broken things could accomplish extraordinary missions when guided by minds that refused to accept conventional definitions of failure. This rifle taught me that perfection isn't the absence of flaws. It's the ability to find tactical advantages in any circumstance. Your job isn't to eliminate uncertainty from warfare. Your job is to become so comfortable with uncertainty that you can weaponize it against enemies who fear it. The students watched with the intensity of people receiving wisdom that could save their lives in future conflicts. Many of them carried their own broken equipment, not because they couldn't access better gear, but because they had learned that sometimes broken was better. "Colonel," asked Lieutenant Kim, another Nevada veteran who had become one of her most successful instructors, "what happens when our enemies learn these protocols, when they start expecting unpredictability from us?" Ghost smiled, recognizing the question that had haunted her research for years. "Then we'll have to find new ways to surprise them. The tactical principles remain constant: find strength in apparent weakness, use limitations as advantages, transform uncertainty into opportunity. But the applications will continue evolving as long as warfare exists." After class, she walked alone to the small museum where her original rifle was displayed alongside artifacts from other significant military innovations. A small placard read, "M110 Semi-Automatic Sniper System, serial number 84847. Used by Colonel Vera Kowalski to engage adaptive drone target, Nevada Test Range, 2025. First documented application of tactical uncertainty principles in modern warfare." Visitors often asked why a broken rifle merited museum display alongside legendary weapons from American military history. The answer was simple but profound, because sometimes the most important victories came not from perfection, but from the courage to find strength in broken places. The desert wind still carried memories of that morning when everything changed, when laughter turned to respect, when failure became innovation, when a damaged rifle and the woman who refused to abandon it proved that the future of warfare belonged not to the perfect, but to the adaptable. Ghost walked into the gathering dusk, knowing that somewhere in the world, operators trained in her protocols were facing impossible missions with broken equipment and unshakable confidence. They carried forward not just tactical techniques, but a fundamental understanding that strength could emerge from any circumstance, that victory often wore the disguise of failure, and that the most dangerous weapon in any arsenal was a mind that refused to accept conventional definitions of what was possible. The broken rifle had taught them all to shoot straight with crooked sights, to find their targets through shifting scopes, to succeed not despite their limitations, but because of them. In a world of perfect weapons and predictable tactics, they had become something entirely new, warriors who turned uncertainty itself into their greatest strategic advantage. And in the end, that made all the difference.